Yeah, never underestimate children. It's a sort of running theme or idea in all of the work that I do, that we always underestimate the abilities of children. I always say the same thing, that the children are okay. It's the adults who have the problems. Yeah, children spend their time solving the problems that the adults create.
Yeah.
That is a lot of how the world works. And look at the world right now. I mean, it's just problems created by adults. It's just what is war? What is fighting? Um, what are the laws and the rules and the regulations? They're all things created by adults, not created by children. Children don't really create those kinds of worlds or environments. Leave children in the playground and they play happily with each other.
Mhm.
They don't fight in general unless they see unless they have examples of fighting. They don't really know what fighting is.
Mhm.
You can't do more than invite people into a conversation. You can't do any more. You can't
Mhm.
force people into a
Mhm.
conversation,
Mhm.
right? So,
Mhm.
so um, the the communication strategy is ask people if they want to join, and if they don't want to join, then
Mhm.
usually eventually they go away, because they realize that there's sort of a power structure
Mhm.
in the conversation happening. And this works not just with children, it works with everybody everywhere. Yeah, you always invite people to join, whoever they
Mhm.
are, wherever they are. You always invite them to join, and if they say no, well, that's their issue then, beyond that, because you can't do any more than invite people in. And the second point is you then see how governments aim to control people. It is through
Mhm.
controlling the environment around about them, and
Mhm.
inviting them into the conversation, but people don't really have the power to do much about a lot of the problems that exist, because the problems are essentially very large problems. Um, and it's kids help us to focus on a lot of the things that are important.
Yes.
The nature of the individual is extremely important, and I'll talk about that in a second. But remember that adults are the only people who are stupid enough to pay to live on the planet that they're born on.
Mhm.
That is a very, very, very important philosophy, and children help
Mhm.
us understand that. We pay money to live on the planet that we're born on.
Mhm.
I mean, that's insane. That's completely insane. Now there's a socioeconomic situation in Western society which says that this is the best way to organize everything. But it's only the best way to organize everything if you're free. And
Mhm.
you can't be free for as long as there is the threat that if you don't pay somebody to live, you go to jail or you go to prison, and that's behind everything, right?
Mhm.
Behind everything is, if you don't pay your bills, you go to prison. It's really, and nobody really wants to talk about it,
Mhm.
because it's a very dark topic. People don't want to talk about the dark topics, but it's 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 very true. And it's interesting that in general it's the government that will tell you it's the government that will put you in prison if you don't give them money, but it's also the government that are telling you that you can't go out and work right now.
Yeah.
So it's the same organization that says it says work to pay us, but we're going to make it difficult for you to work. And it's an impossible scenario. And children see through that straight away, right? Children are the only individuals without prejudice. And so it means you decide before you know. That's what prejudice is. You decide before you know. And some prejudice is natural. You know, maybe Slovak people want to help Slovak people. People would say that's prejudice, but maybe that's natural, right? I mean, it seems natural to me, right? You know, people in company A want to help people in company A. It seems natural that you want to help people on the same team as you. And so there is some level of prejudice which is completely natural. And there's a strong push in modern society that the prejudice is bad, but the truth is prejudice is natural. Therefore, it's not bad at all. It's not bad at all to be prejudiced. It's there is nothing more ridiculously stupid than adults teaching children to treat everybody equally. There's nothing more stupid than that. Because, first of all, adults don't treat adults equally. And secondly, children do already treat everybody equally. And so when adults try to teach children to treat everybody equally, it's ridiculously silly. You know, it's adults trying to manage their own problem. That's all a lot of teaching and education and all the things surrounding that are. It's adults trying to manage the world of the children. You know, what are the famous communist sayings that give me the children and I will show you a compliant, obedient population. I mean, that's communism, socialism, Marxism down throughout history. Is let's control the children. Let's decide what the children will do. At the time, see, people have a misjudgment of history. At the time of the American Revolution, 98% of the Western populace in civilized urban America were literate, meaning they could read, and there were no schools. 98% of the population could read, and there were no schools. Right? Now, the average reading skills from school age, late teenage graduate students now in some urban areas of the United States is only 70%. So that's a drop of about 30% in average skills and abilities. And this is due to adults' fear. Adults fear that children will not learn if you don't teach them, which is the most backwards idea in history, the idea that people don't learn if you don't teach them. Because teaching and learning are two different topics. They're not the same thing. And you know, this has been the subject of in the last couple of books that I've written, which are that there's this idea that if you don't teach, people don't learn, which is ridiculously stupid. People learned to drive before there were driving lessons, right? It's not bad to have a teacher. It's not bad to have lessons. Think about every computer program that you've ever learned to use. And the most famous example across the world of this is the internet. There is no instruction book for how the internet works. There are no lessons for how the internet works.
Mm.
It is the single most vital and important tool in everybody's life on the planet, maybe apart from growing food. Yeah.
Mm.
And it's the single most vital communication tool. And there's no instruction on it or how it works. In fact, the only thing that does exist is people trying to stop people using it. That's the only thing, right? And programs trying to stop people communicating. Yeah. People putting limits on it. People putting limits on communication. Now, why would you want to limit communication? It doesn't seem very sensible to me. It's a bit like telling people who they can talk to and who they can't talk to. People have to decide that for themselves. So the secret, which is not really a secret, under everything is that we only ever teach ourselves. And I, having had a physical school for 10 years, and it became very obvious to me after 3 or 4 years of running the school that my job was not to teach. My job was not to teach people, because you self-learn, right? The teacher doesn't, the learning is not because of the teacher. It's not. The learning is because of the student. The student is more important than the teacher. Does the teacher matter? Yes, as a facilitator, as a tutor, as a tour guide for education, like a parent, right? The parent is the tour guide for life. Yeah. The parent is somebody who walks around and says, "Oh, look at this. Oh, look at that. Hey, look at they're the tour guide for life." And the teacher is just the same. And when you understand that, you understand that teachers replace parents. And when you understand that people who are paid to do a job never do a better job than people who love their job. People who are paid never do a better job than people who love their job. People who love their job always do a better job than people who are paid to do their job. Yeah. Now, people who are paid to do a job can do a job very well, but people who love it will always do it better. They'll always pay attention and take care of the details of everything. They'll always do it better. And that's when you understand that if teachers replace parents and teachers don't love the children because they don't and they can't, for lots of different psychological reasons, it's just not possible. You can like the children. A lot of teachers don't even like children, right? Because people are teachers for different reasons. Most people are teachers. You know why most people are teachers? Most people are teachers, A, because they don't know what to do, and B, because they get holidays. Right? That's why most people are teachers. They're not teachers because they love children. They will tell you they love children. And trust me, I worked in education my entire life, and every teacher is like, "I work with children because I love children." It's just not true. It's just not true. It's just the standard response that everybody gives because they hear everybody else saying it and they think it's the right thing to say. And it's marketing, right? I started a school because I love children. At the end of the day, it's a business. And you get some people who care more than other people, and that's very, very, very important. But there are very, very complex psychological aspects to why people are involved in teaching. And like anything, you get, like any topic, you get good teachers and bad teachers. Like you get good bus drivers and bad bus drivers, right? You get
mm,
you know, it's like everything. And the problem is, if you're a good teacher, your hands are tied. You're told which topic to teach. You're told which book to read. You are told how to do it, where to do it, and when to do it, and you can't change it.
mm,
And that's not being a teacher, because being a teacher is being flexible enough to change what you need to change in order to make it work. Yeah, the world is not in a classroom. It's not. The world is not. The world is trees and forests and concrete and noise and the craziness, the unpredictability, which can be positive. The serendipity of life. There's a great word, serendipity. Serendipity is the happiness that comes from things that you don't plan and you don't expect, and that's what children bring into the world and remind us is important, because for a company that produces products, you want standards and standardization and organization and certainty, which is really, really complicated, because you know, when you sit in your car and you turn the key or press the button, you want your car to start, right?
yes,
Every time. Every single time you want it to start. Not 9 times out of 10, not 99 times out of 100.
mm,
Every single time. And that is really complicated. That is really, really difficult to make anything that functions all the time, every time. You know, every time you click the on button on your computer, you want it to turn on. Every time you click the send button on your phone, you want it to send. You want it to work every single time. And that's one of the most complicated things in the world, because human beings don't work like that, right? We don't work perfectly every single time. And so that's why you have to have great respect for big organizations and big companies and the complex systems that they have. You have to respect it, because they deliver something that is quite unique in the human experience. However, when we deal with people and education and children, that's different. We can't treat children like products.
mm,
We can't expect them to. I mean, we constantly push them to be perfect, and that's impossible. that's and when someone is perfect, they're very often broken. They're broken by this constant desire to try to be perfect. And a lot of children grow up and they don't feel confident in themselves because they were never perfect for their parents, and so they can't be perfect for the world. And that's a giant mistake. And that's where the unconditional love comes into things, which is quite complicated to understand. But in general, you should love your children whatever the situation is, which is really, really difficult, because we as human beings are not perfect and we reject a lot of things,
mm,
which is what we learn from Christian Western tradition and society, which is what Jesus said, none who come to me will be rejected. Jesus said, if you come to me, I will accept you. I will accept you all, whoever you are, wherever you're from, all will be accepted. And that was a change in Western tradition and history, because people had problems before that. You know, they would accept some people and reject others, and it was okay to have some people as friends and to want to kill other people. and hopefully as a society and a world, we've learned that that's not the right way forward. And there's adults fear children because children
Mm.
show them their own failings, their own inadequacies, their own mistakes. The children are the perfect mirror of all that is good and all that is bad within the people around about them. And that's really, really difficult psychologically for people to handle, because we can be great at one thing, maybe more than one thing, but to children we're always everything.
Mm.
And that means we're not going to be great, because it's impossible to be great at everything. You know, in our jobs, in our profession, in our social lives, in our hobbies, we can be great at something and we can be respected for that. But that's just one thing, right? And the one thing doesn't exist with children, because children see everything. And that's hard for adults, because it's like, I've lived on the planet for 40 years and blah blah blah. It's like, yeah, but you still make mistakes, because we all make mistakes.
Mm.
And that empathy and that forgiveness and that understanding of mistakes, and that not crucifying people for making mistakes, and the understanding that there's in my book, The Language of Deceit, there's a section on all of the important human characteristics that are not included in education. And there's a whole list of about 50 different human aspects to personality and character development that are not included in education.
Mm.
And they're all very, very, very important. Like you never get, and you shouldn't, right? Because it's wrong, but you never get graded on kindness. But kindness, being kind, is far more important than being correct.
Mm.
Being kind is far more important than being correct. It's a far more important strength, the ability to understand and help people, than it is to be right about everything. It's nice to be right as well, but it's easy to be right about the things that are safe, but a life that's well lived is a life that pushes borders and pushes boundaries and takes us to new places. And that means we're going to make mistakes. We're going to fall over. We're going to, have accidents. We're going to fall off our bicycle going straight down the mountain, or the rocket is going to explode as it goes up into the sky, because we push the limits, and we understand that. And at the essence underlying everything, life is very much a question of survival, because we have to try to survive from the moment that we're born, and tomorrow was never guaranteed. And the time, I think it's really important to understand how children see time. Time is a trap for adults, and not always a bad one. It's a framework to live within, and frameworks can be very positive if used in the right way. But children don't work within that sphere of things, and adults are always trying to shape children into the adult world. Why do you have to get up at this time? Why do you have to go to sleep at this time? And I'm not convinced personally, this is a personal thing, everybody will give a different answer to this. I'm not convinced that it's a good thing, because if we think that every child is an individual, then you have to realize that it's probably not good for them to live exactly the same way as other people live. And this is what I've seen from my work with children, that children are not just different in terms of personality, they're different in terms of how they live through the day and have different experiences. Some children will be more creative in the morning, some will be more creative in the afternoon, some will be more creative in the evening. So how does that work if your creative time is always 12 o'clock to 2 o'clock? That's not going to work for most children. You can't force, you know, the brain to be creative at the non-creative time. You can't do that. That causes disconnect in the brain. And like I've noticed with my middle daughter, her most creative time is between 10 o'clock in the evening and 2 o'clock in the morning. So if she's told to go to bed at 9 o'clock, she doesn't have any creative time. She doesn't have any. If she's told to go to bed at 9, she doesn't have any at all. Zero. But you should tell your child to go to bed at 9. Really? Why? Because all children are exactly the same, right? And they all behave in exactly the same way, and they all need exactly the same things at exactly the same time. Well, no, they're individual. Well, really, if they're individual, then you have to understand that what is right for some people is wrong for others. And there's no rules except the rules that we create, and maybe the rules that we create are not the right rules. And unless you completely experiment with everything, you don't know, and maybe everything needs to change. And maybe we need to do the opposite of what we think is the right thing to do. And then again, maybe we don't. But it's interesting to see how when you take your hands off, how things will develop, and how children will solve problems that adults can't. They also won't see the problem. They also, you know, where adults will see a problem, children won't see a problem there at all. And maybe the adult is right to see a problem, but maybe they're not. And I don't think that children do anything essentially that's wrong or bad. I think that they just explore, and the more that they can explore and the more freedom they have to explore, the happier they will be, because happiness is very much the opportunities that exist to do things. And as long as you create the opportunities to do things, they'll be fine. And too many rules and too many borders and too many boundaries and too much. Well, here's one example of something that is both logical and not logical at the same time. Schools try to regulate biological function. And the example is, if children want to go to the toilet, they have to go during the break or the lunchtime. Or if there's some extreme emergency, they can go during the class, but they're sort of trained to not do that. So school is trying to regulate biological function. That's teaching children that the biological function is wrong. But the biological function is, and it's good to have some level of self-control, but you don't want to go against your own biology. And Well, here's my experience of what happens when you've got too much when you've got too much pressure as a result of what happens within the education system, which is always regulating, always controlling, always telling people where to go, what to think, what to read, what's important, what's not important. When you release the pressure, people go crazy. You know, what happens to students when they have a party? They'll get blind drunk, right? You know, we've all been to the party, we've all been to the club, we've all been to the cottage, we've all been to the place in the countryside, and you know, there's 20 bottles of strong alcohol, and everyone is running around the forest naked, you know, or doing whatever, right? How do we even get to that point of insanity? And how is it okay? We get to that point because we put so much pressure on the children that it just explodes, and that's how it explodes. It explodes in a minor, you could call it minor form of alcoholism, and that is a little bit crazy. And there's, in my experience, there are very few children who don't go crazy when they're like between the ages of 15 and 20. There are very few children who don't go crazy when they have that free space, because they're put under so much pressure. And that's wrong to think that we're putting children under that much pressure to perform and to be successful and to produce good results, because we know at the end of the day that being a nice person is what matters. And none of us as parents, look, we've all been to the crazy parties, as far as I'm aware, right? But none of us as parents really want our kids to go to the crazy parties, right? Although we realize it might be part of their life in the future. Might be, I don't know. But, you know, I think if we're good parents, we want to navigate our children away from that. We want to navigate our children towards a place where our children are comfortable being themselves. And I would like for my children to grow up and see the children who are drinking too much and not think that they're the cool people. Because that's the world that I grew up in, and as a teacher that I've seen my younger students grow up in, which is that the people partying and the people drinking and the people being crazy are the cool people. And I think that's fucking wrong. I think that's wrong. I think the really, really, really cool people are the people with self-control. The really, really, really cool people are the people who can say, yeah, I don't want to be part of that. Those are the really cool people, the people with self-control. And we don't focus on that at all. We tend to see the crazy people because of the pop culture, because of the movies, because of the excess, because of the craziness, because when you turn on the news on television, there's nothing but violence and death and sex and lots of dark shit, right? And that's the world that we fill our children's brains with in those teenage years. And it's not something that they look forward to in the future. But the really cool kids are the kids who can step away from everything and disconnect and not follow the crowd and not be exactly the same as everybody. They can join in and take part and participate in everything, but the really, really, really cool kids, and it took me forever to process that in my brain, because I grew up in party culture, not realizing that it wasn't really that good a thing. And it took me a long time to appreciate the really, really super cool kids were actually the kids who could take a step back from everything and go, they're being crazy, they're partying, they're doing drugs, they're drinking way too much, and I don't want to be part of that, because that's a bad road to go down. I'm not telling them not to do it, because, you know, that's their thing. You know, your life is your choice, and Your problems are your problems, right? But the cool kids are always the kids who are comfortable with saying no to things, and the children get that habit directly from their parents, because you're not allowed to say no in school. You're not allowed to say no. You have to say yes to everything, because if you don't say yes to everything, you're punished. You're punished. You're given detentions and extra homework and extra work to do, and it's all backwards, because if you're bad, they give you extra writing, but the truth is writing is a good thing. But they make you think that it's bad by giving you extra writing, because if you can communicate well, if you can speak well, if you can persuade people, if you can negotiate well, if you can write well, if you can read and understand the depth of something, if you can do those things, you are the most dangerous person on the planet. Because a dangerous person is not a drunk person. They're not a dangerous person. They're a stupid person. A dangerous person is an educated person who is in control of themselves. That's a dangerous person. And society needs dangerous people because it needs people who have self-control. Because if you have no control, then you're always waiting for somebody else to tell you to stop. And if you have a group of friends who are the same as you, then you'll all be waiting for someone to tell you to stop. So nobody will tell you to stop. So you will just continue and continue and continue and continue. And it'll take you to a bad place where things will happen that you don't want, or that are unplanned, or that that they're irreversible or difficult to get out of, because one of the secrets of life is don't do anything that you can't undo. So the first rule of medicine, do no harm. If you're not sure that it's going to help, don't do it. Don't do it. Because there has to be some certainty that what you're doing is going to have a positive effect. Otherwise, it's an experiment, and experiments are okay, but you have to realize an experiment is an experiment. You don't know what the result is going to be. And it could be really bad, which is why we don't want to do a big experiment in the world, not knowing exactly what the results are going to be, because it could be really bad. We want to do an experiment in a small trial group where we monitor it extremely carefully, and we do it several times. And then we have a better idea of what it is that we're going to achieve. And all, of course, all the information needs to be open to people as well, because sometimes people from outside of the situation can see things very differently from people inside. So, because there's a lot of pressure on people inside the system, and we put children under a lot of pressure, and that's not a good thing. And it's always, and no one talks about how do we have healthy, confident children. No one talks about it. I don't hear it. I mean, I work in education, and it's never a conversation that I've heard in education. How do we have healthy, confident children? No, people don't talk about it. And you have healthy, confident children, I think, when you yourself take a step back from things, and you set that example for your children, taking a step back from things, and then they see that and know when to get involved and when to walk away. It's a difficult choice sometimes. There are some battles that you want to fight, and that are important to fight, and there are some that it's best if you walk away from the situation and you don't fight them. And it's difficult to know which one, but that's a learning and growing process, and the parents need to communicate about that with their children. why did you do that? I did that for this reason. Oh, okay. And was that a good thing or a bad thing? You know, I tell my children about my mistakes as much as anything else. I did this and this was great, but I did this and this wasn't so great. And how you manage the problem is a great part of what children learn when they grow up. You know, don't panic, right? Don't panic. Don't be overly, you know, be careful and be aware and be prepared, but don't be overly nervous about the fact that problems exist, because they do exist, and we have to navigate through them one by one. And every now and then there's a problem that we can't do anything about, and that's really hard. And people want to shelter children from everything that happens in life, and maybe it's good to shelter children, but then what kind of world have you created if you don't want children to see what the truth is? And I'm a great believer that children need to know what the truth of the situation is, and not to shelter them from it, because they don't grow up. They just don't. You know, if a child is old enough to watch the news and understand what's on the news, then they're old enough to basically have their parents communicate about everything with them. Basically, you know, if a child's old enough to watch the news and see war and death and famine and destruction and bombs and violence and guns and lies and all those negative elements, because most of it's negative, then they're old enough to have a talk about everything. If a child's old enough to ask, then they're old enough to get a truthful answer, whatever the answer is. If a child's old enough to ask.
Mm.
And they'll always ask when they're ready. And the questions will always be difficult. Right? Questions will always be difficult to answer, because sometimes parents don't know about certain things. And I love to sit with my son and Google stuff. I hate using that word, but you know, search engine stuff. Because my son will ask me a question, I'll be like, I don't know, let's check. And we'll go on a search engine and we'll search for it together and we'll read about it. And I think that's a very healthy way to respond to the situation, to admit that there's things that we don't know, but we can find out. And it's not difficult. You know, that it used to be a joke I used to say to people, do I look like Google? You know, because people ask silly questions sometimes. Do I look like, I don't know. Yeah. Does it matter? I don't know, but the information is out there. We just have to find a way. That's one of those educational secrets, which is, it's not important to remember data as much as it is to know where to find the data if you need it. And the concept is the library. You know, your own brain can be a library. You can have a digital library, you have a physical library as well. But people and companies can be libraries of information. And that's one of those management secrets, which is that if you're in a higher level of management, it's not important to know everything. But it is important to be able to find the information, which is usually to know the right person to go to who knows the information. And maybe that person will think that you're stupid because you don't know it. But you gotta just accept that and realize that you don't need to know. At the top of the company, you don't need to know. But you need to be able to find out. when it matters, you need to be able to discover the information, but you don't need to know it all the time because you go crazy in that situation. All you need to do is be able to find the information, which usually means finding the right person who knows and accessing the person, which is, you know, people are more important than anything else.
Mm.
Your future success is dependent on your friends. Crazy. Your future success is dependent on your friends. Your future income is dependent on your friends. Where you live is probably dependent on your friends. And you know, it's the 6 degrees of separation principle, that everything will come through the people that you know.
Mm.
And that's where social media and networking should give people certain advantages, although it doesn't appear to be happening at the moment. But you know, maybe that's why. Maybe we're not in World War IV because we have social media. It's theory.
Mm.
Might or might not be true. I don't know. Maybe we're not in World War IV because we have social media, and because we have social media, we can stop it. We can see what's coming.
Mm.
And maybe you could argue that World War IV is an information war, and that the social media is the center of that whole idea and that whole concept. But the fact that we can share information very, very quickly with each other is useful. And some of the largest protests in British history happened this weekend in every city across the country. Because there was nothing on any of the media channels about it. Nothing. Hundreds of thousands of people marched through London alone. That's London. That's not including Manchester and Liverpool and Newcastle and Birmingham and Edinburgh and Glasgow. Hundreds of thousands. And it wasn't on the BBC. It wasn't on the BBC. And then you can't say the BBC didn't know, because they hundreds of thousands of people walked past the BBC offices in London. And it wasn't on the BBC. However, there was on the BBC a story about 5 climate protesters who blocked a road somewhere. Right? The question is, has it always been like that, or is that a recent thing? I don't know. I would tend to believe that it's maybe always been like that. And when you understand that, it's crazy. It's people are like, oh, I didn't know. Because, and what, how can you trust any of these organizations if the situation is like that? How can you trust anything that anybody says? I don't think you can trust anyone you don't know. I have faith, and like, I have faith in people, but I'm not going to trust anyone I don't know, because I don't know them. It doesn't make any sense.